So what you just saw there was a SWAT takedown of a suspect authorities believed was planning a mass shooting targeting Muslims right here in Jacksonville. The state attorney's office just released footage in connection to the December arrest, and the suspect actually purchased a silencer that undercover agents believed he planned to use in an attack on a local mosque. And that's where we find our Julia Janae live tonight. And Julia, how was that video recorded?
Anthony, that camera was worn by an undercover agent who had befriended the suspect. And where I am in front of is the Islamic Center of Northeast Florida. You see there observers who are here observing Ramadan at this time, and this is where they would be on a Friday. It's also where the FBI believes that suspect was plotting to take lives. And in those records released by the Department of Justice, he had already scoped out this tower with plans to commit those acts on a Friday, day of worship.
Body camera footage worn by an undercover employee captured a suspect caught completely off guard. JSO and the FBI have been tracking Bernandino Bolatete for weeks. This takedown in an Academy Sports parking lot comes after the suspect is seen inside the store purchasing ammunition.
So these are good?
Yeah, that's good.
In recorded conversations, he told a shooting range buddy about his anti-Islamic views. That agent pretended to have similar sentiments, and according to transcripts, he tried to determine when Bolatete would act on his verbalized plan. After a conversation in November when agents recorded that Bolatete said he had little left to live for and only 30% function in his remaining kidney.
However, you don't register the suppressor in your name is because one of the conditions there is the police can come into your house anytime to inspect it.
Jump in first.
On December 1st, he would be brought in for questioning and charged in connection with buying a silencer, one the FBI believes would have been used in his plan to kill worshipers.
Now, after that arrest, it was revealed that Bolatete had 12 guns and 2,500 rounds of ammo at the time. He faces a total of 10 years in prison for the current charges that he's facing. We're now reporting live from the South Side. Julia Janae, First Coast News on your side.
Very disturbing. Thank you, Julia. Tonight,